For some reason or other, when I was a contributor to Foxtel, letters sent to me were always addressed to the Reverend Father John Edwards. I suppose it was a form of reverence or a disguise their Catholic roots, I don't know. But then last year I got a letter where obviously there had been some trouble with their computer programming, because the letter was addressed to the Reverend Fat John Edwards. And I was thinking, probably I've got a case here for, I don't know, something defamation of character. I don't know what it was, but that could be it. And so we come to Father's Day. Well, looking around the congregation, I can see some fathers and I can see some not fathers. So I just don't want to talk about fathers. So I thought, what could I talk about to include everyone? And the answer seemed to be the family. Now, I have a very good story for Father's Day. And I was telling my son about it, and his response was, "Dad, you can't say that." So I'm not going to say it. On his 4th birthday, my son said to me, "How old are you, Dad?" And I said, "I'm 33. And he said, "You haven't got much longer to live, have you?" He wasn't quite right. But I read about a minister who went to preach in a little country church, took his son with him, and when they got to the church, in the very front foyer, there was a box. It was a collection box. So the father gave his son $10 and said, "Put that in there." At the end of the service, the treasurer of the church came to their minister and said, "The custom in this church is that when we have a visiting preacher, we give him the proceeds of the collection box." And so the treasurer took $10 out of the collection box and handed it to the minister. And as they were going home, the son said to his father, "Dad, if you'd have put more in, you'd have got more out." And perhaps that's not a bad motto for life. So when I say family, what do I mean? Once when I said family, you'd know what I meant. 2 people, a man and a woman who were married, lived in a house with their children. He was called Dad. It was like my dad. He lived in the house with 12 children, or my mum, 6 children, or in my case, 1. The husband went to work to buy the food, to get the strength, to earn the money, to go to church, go to work. The family is not very mobile. They moved occasionally, but not very often. In many cases, the grandparents lived, and they didn't live far away, so they were kind of childminders. But today things are so different. Just think for a moment of some of the kinds of families we have. We have extended families. We have families where both work and are both married and have kids, or families where both work and are married and don't have kids, where people both work and are not married. We have step families and single parent families and house husbands and same-sex families and families like Joseph where there's tension. So I went to the Gospels to see what I could find out about families. Nothing I found there was very encouraging. And unlike most stories about people's lives, we know very little about the family life of Jesus. There's a story about his going to Jerusalem and talking to the rabbis. We have a story of him at the first miracle. His mother says to him, "They have no wine left," and Jesus says, "Mother, your concern is not mine." But when I speak about the family, I mean the church should be a place where there is understanding, security, love, and the challenge of the kingdom. I'm an only child, and I have never known a time when I was not loved. My father was out of work for 7 years during the Depression, but we got through. My mother made aprons and sold them. But it was a place where there was love and where I felt secure and at home. Someone wrote, "A family should be a harbour from which the ship leaves to sail the seas, and not a dock where it ties up and stays." So the good values of love, community, come to us from the church. For most of us, I suppose, looking around the congregation today, when I speak about fathers or family, you immediately think of grandchildren. As one of my friends said, if I'd have known how good it was to be a grandmother, I'd have become a grandmother first. So when Jesus talks about becoming like a child, what does he mean? Well, of course, he meant innocence, the innocence of a child. We know all about that. Someone wrote, since having 2 children, I can understand better how the doctrine of total depravity came across when I look at the doctrine of infant damnation. I think of children. Well, it's not like that, because within the family we have people who are dependable. When I was 8 years of old, we moved to a different church in Sydney, and I was there for the Christmas evening concert, at which we had a visit from Father Christmas, and I was given a cricket ball. We must have come late. It wasn't usual for us because we were sitting in the very back row of a hall that was about as long as this church is long. And I looked at the cricket ball, and I looked at my father, who was down in the back row, and I threw the ball to him and said, "Dad, catch," which he did, because I knew I could trust him. He was dependable. When we think of that, we think of a family where there is love, where there is certainty, where there is acceptance. And the reading said, do not hinder them. We can be making Jesus unattractive if other interests are more important. Was my what? My studies? My church work? Was that more important than my family? And as I've got older, 2 things. One is, fewer things are really important. The things that are important are so important, and mostly they concern the family. So when I think of the family of God, I think of you people, those of you who have come together to worship God and to serve him. At the 9 o'clock service, someone said how awful it must be to be lonely at Christmas time, to be homeless at Christmas time. And in many ways, Christmas can be a very, very lonely time for people. When I worked at City Mission, time and time again we would have men coming in for Christmas dinner who had nowhere else to go. And perhaps one thing that this church might think about is what it does at Christmas time for the lonely people around us. Do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to them. Do you want some hints for living, hints for parenting? Let me just read to you a couple of things that I came across this week. One was from the Readings catalogue. 10 things to always tell your child. I'm proud of you. Wasn't always like that with me, I guess. Oh, sure, I was dux of the school by 150 marks out of 200. But my mother would always say to me, "How come you made a mistake in the maths?" I'm proud of you. You can always talk to me. I'll always have your back. It's okay to make mistakes. Be kind to yourself. It's cool to be different. Perhaps this one, you're loved no matter what. It's okay to feel sad or angry sometimes. I love spending time with you. I discovered many years ago that there's a very big difference between being a father and being a parent. If you're a father, your wife leaves the hospital, they give you the baby and say good luck and off you go. Parenting is a much different thing. It means learning a set of values. It means setting examples. It means showing love in a practical way. I like this. Learning for life. If a child lives with hostility, they learn to fight. If a child lives with ridicule, they learn to be shy. If a child lives with shame, they learn to feel guilty. If a child lives with tolerance, they learn to be patient. If a child lives with encouragement, they learn confidence. If a child lives with praise, they learn to appreciate. If a child lives with fairness, they learn justice. If a child lives with security, they learn to have faith. If a child lives with approval, they learn to like themselves. And if a child lives with acceptance and friendship, they learn to find love in the world. On this Father's Day, on this Family Day, let us give thanks to God for our parents, for people who showed us the love of God, not talked about it, but actually showed it in the way they lived. And let us commit ourselves to living for Christ as his family. Amen.